Before we drift into tonight's tale, I'd love to know where in the world are you watching from tonight? And what time is it for you right now? Drop it in the comments below. It's always magical, seeing how far and wide this sleepy little community reaches. All right, lights low, blankets up, let's begin. Tonight, we wander into a story wrapped in mystery, old parchment, and heroic destiny, a tale that starts not with a grand battle, but with a quiet, curious book resting high on a floating spire. A book that was never meant to be stumbled upon, but waited patiently for someone worthy to find it, or perhaps, more curiously, for someone it could find. This is the story of the Enchiridion, and how it chose a boy named Finn. But to understand this moment, that soft collision of destiny and choice, we must float backward, deeper into the foggy past of Ooo, to the time before Finn ever held a sword, before he ever climbed that impossible mountain, to the ancient whispers of the book itself. Long before it was placed atop the trials, the Enchiridion existed. That much we know. But how far back does its history go? Some legends say it was forged at the edge of reality, inked with truths from a forgotten age. Others believe it was written by the first hero, or perhaps not written at all, but born fully formed from the collective will of the cosmos to shape what it means to be good. Its cover worn, golden, and thick like armor wasn't just there to protect its contents. It was a gate, a test. Only those who embodied what the book stood for could even touch it without consequences. It is said that more than one false hero tried to steal the Enchiridion, only to vanish or transform into something else entirely. But still, the book waited. It was placed on a towering spire suspended in the sky, protected by puzzles, illusions, and creatures not quite of this world. The spire didn't just exist in one place. It shimmered between locations, like it was caught in a dream, only revealing itself to those it invited. And then there was Finn, a boy not born into royalty or prophecy, just a human kid with too much energy, a wild imagination, and a heart that burned like a campfire in the middle of a dark forest. At this point in his life, Finn had already done his fair share of adventuring, but nothing like this. The spire called to him in a way he couldn't explain. Not like a voice, but a pull, a whisper in the bones. When Princess Bubblegum told him about the Enchiridion, a manual for heroes, Finn's eyes lit up like stars, a book that could show him how to be the best hero he could possibly be. It sounded almost too perfect. But the truth is, the book wasn't looking for someone perfect. It was looking for someone real. And so Finn and Jake set out unaware that this journey would be unlike anything they'd faced before. Every step up that spire peeled back the outer layers of who Finn thought he was. This wasn't just about defeating monsters or solving riddles. The Enchiridion's path was made to press gently but unrelentingly on the soul. One of the first trials they encountered was simple on the surface. A tired old man hung from a branch, crying out for help. Below him, a small ant civilization, just tiny, scurrying creatures doing their work. Jake, ever pragmatic, suggested they pull down the branch, letting the man drop onto the ants. But Finn paused. That didn't feel right. Instead, Finn chose a harder path, one that required effort, risk, and a bit of pain. He helped the man, but without crushing the ants. And the book saw that. Not just the action, but the thought behind it. Mercy, balance, awareness. This is what the Enchiridion really tested. Not power, not cleverness, but something deeper. Something that can't be taught in sword swings or spells. The Enchiridion, in a sense, was watching. Always, not like a creature, but like an idea that had learned how to dream. And in Finn, it saw potential not for perfection, but for growth, for humility, for bravery of the soul, not just the body. As Finn continued his trials, he came across more illusions designed to test his intentions. At one point, a bridge lay broken, with a creature asking him for payment to pass. Another moment, a beautiful butterfly, wounded and trapped, fluttered beside a shortcut. Each decision Finn made rippled through the air like silent chords of music, feeding into the book itself. And with each good deed, each kind choice, each moment of hesitation in the face of easy violence, the path became clearer. Not easier, but clearer. It's as if the Enchiridion was gently nodding, page by page, whispering, "Yes, this is what a hero looks like." But it wasn't only Finn who was being shaped. The book or the presence within it was reacting, almost unfolding more of itself in response to his choices. Some believe the Enchiridion wasn't static at all, that it evolved alongside the hero, revealing new pages only when the soul was ready to understand them. And what a comforting thought that is, that wisdom doesn't arrive all at once, but waits until we're ready to receive it. Some say that when Finn finally reached the chamber where the Enchiridion rested, the book was already awake, not literally breathing, of course, but alive in that strange, mythic way some objects feel when they've been touched by fate too many times. It didn't sparkle or glow. There were no trumpet sounds, no echoing choirs, just a simple stillness and the heavy, quiet knowledge that something important was about to happen. Finn stepped forward, his fingers brushing the ancient cover, and nothing exploded. No lightning, no fire, just a warmth. Not heat, but warmth, like the kind you feel in your chest when you realize you've done something right. Jake looked nervous. He always did around magical stuff that didn't bark or bite. But Finn, he didn't hesitate. He opened the book, and it opened to him. Inside, the Enchiridion wasn't just full of words. It held truths. The kind you don't always understand the first time you read them. Diagrams that shimmered slightly when viewed at an angle. Phrases that rearranged themselves when you weren't looking. It was like the book didn't just contain instructions, it contained reflections. Pages that responded to who you were and who you might become. Some pages told of old heroes' names, long forgotten, who faced impossible odds and chose compassion anyway. Other passages gave vague advice, wrapped in poetry. To open a locked gate, first unlock your own fear. Finn didn't fully grasp what it all meant. He wasn't supposed to, not yet. The book wasn't there to tell him how to live. It was there to accompany him on the road. That's what made it so powerful and so dangerous. You see, while the Enchiridion was pure in design, the intention of its holder shaped how it was used. In Finn's hands, it became a map to kindness, courage, and self-discovery. But in another's grip, it could become a weapon, a guide to domination, disguised as virtue. And others were watching. The book had not just revealed itself to Finn, it had announced itself. Across Ooo, in deep forgotten vaults and quiet corners of the cosmos, ancient eyes opened. Beings like Magic Man, Prismo, and even the Lich, they felt a ripple, a tremor in the pattern. The Enchiridion was awake again, and its path had been set in motion. But for now, Finn was simply a boy with a book, heart pounding, eyes wide, dreaming of the kind of hero he could be. He carried it back with pride, holding it gently like it might dissolve in the wind. The pages rustled softly when he walked, as if whispering little affirmations to him. Yes, keep going. You're on the right path. Jake joked about using it as a coaster. Finn just smiled, knowing something in his bones that this book would change everything. And it would, because the Enchiridion wasn't just a book of heroism. It was a mirror, one that didn't reflect what you looked like, but who you truly were inside. It didn't care about crowns or capes or combat skills. What mattered were the invisible things: empathy, selflessness, conviction. The strength to do the right thing even when no one was watching, especially then. And in this quiet, mythic moment, just a boy, a book, and a dream, something ancient and wonderful began again. Not with a roar, but with a whisper. A whisper that would carry across dimensions, through time, and into the hearts of those who still believe in the gentle, stubborn light of a hero soul. Now, holding the Enchiridion was one thing. Understanding it, that was another matter entirely. Finn didn't crack it open and suddenly become the ultimate hero. In fact, the more he read, the more mysterious the book seemed. It wasn't structured like a regular manual. There were no numbered chapters, no table of contents. Some sections looked like nursery rhymes. Others resembled ancient mathematical equations drawn in golden ink. A few pages even refused to show their words unless Finn was feeling a certain way. One day a passage would be blank. The next, after a tough decision in a dungeon or a hard moment with Princess Bubblegum, a line of text would appear where before there was none. The Enchiridion wasn't just guiding Finn, it was growing with him. Responding, shifting, quietly teaching him that heroism wasn't about a destination. It was a living path. And this idea, this flexibility, is perhaps what made the book so powerful and so feared. Because not all heroes follow the same path. Not all choices are clear. And sometimes the hardest battles are the ones inside your own mind. One particular entry puzzled Finn for weeks. It showed an image of a forked road. One side was lined with gold and sunlight, leading to a shining tower. The other path led into a misty forest, shadowed and crooked. The only text beneath it was, "The true path cannot be seen by eyes alone." Finn didn't get it. Not until later, when he was faced with the choice to let an enemy go or strike when they were weak. He remembered the image then, and without knowing why, he chose the harder path, mercy. It wasn't rewarding in the moment. It didn't feel heroic. But later, he understood. The Enchiridion wasn't teaching him how to win. It was teaching him how to be whole. And that's something even the most powerful beings in the universe often forget. Meanwhile, the Enchiridion's reappearance didn't just inspire Finn. It also stirred up whispers in corners of the world most creatures dared not tread. The Ice King, whose mind flickered between madness and memory, once muttered that he'd seen the book before in another life, he said, as he scrawled little hearts in the margins of his fan fiction. No one believed him. But maybe, just maybe, he was right. Magic Man, who understood more about reality than he let on, once warned, "Books like that, they don't just teach you how to be a hero. They teach others how to twist heroes into something else." And then there was Princess Bubblegum, rational, brilliant, wary. She trusted Finn, of course. But the Enchiridion, she studied it like a ticking time bomb. Even she could feel it, the raw, ancient power sleeping beneath its worn leather cover. Some theorized the book was older than Ooo itself, that it came from before the Mushroom War, or even before Earth as we know it, passed down from one timeline to another, a constant, a fixed object drifting between branching realities, not bound to one dimension, not really of any place. A myth that could travel, and yet somehow it ended up with a boy, a mortal boy with scruffy hair and a big heart. Maybe that's what made the book so special, that it didn't demand perfection. It didn't look for royalty or prophecy, just goodness. Raw, imperfect, earnest goodness. Even Jake, who preferred naps and bacon pancakes over cosmic revelations, started to notice. "Dude, he once said, half joking, half serious. That book's making you weirdly wise. Like you're talking in riddles more than usual. Finn laughed. But deep down, he felt it too. The book wasn't just changing his knowledge. It was changing his heart. And that's what real stories do, don't they? They sneak in through the cracks, not like thunder, but like a soft breeze under your door, quietly shifting something inside you. You don't even notice it at first. But one day you look back and you realize you're not the same person who began the journey. You've grown, you've become. So when Finn read the final line of one of the Enchiridion's early pages, a line that shimmered faintly before fading away, it didn't frighten him. It moved him. The hero's path is not walked with feet, but with choices. He closed the book, and for a moment it purred. Not a sound you could hear, but a feeling like the forest after rain, like someone or something was proud of him. Because in a world filled with swords and sorcery, monsters and mayhem, the real magic isn't in the battles. It's in the heart that chooses kindness over and over again, even when no one is watching. As time passed, the Enchiridion began to take on a deeper role in Finn's life, not just as a guide, but as a kind of silent companion. There were moments when he wouldn't open it for days. He'd leave it on his nightstand, resting beside his hat or tucked beneath a half-eaten sandwich Jake had forgotten. But every time Finn returned to it, even casually flipping through the pages, something would resonate. A symbol that mirrored his dream, a phrase that echoed a recent decision, a passage that, though unread before, felt suddenly familiar. That's when he realized maybe the Enchiridion wasn't a book you read once. Maybe it was a book you carried your whole life. Because being a hero wasn't a single act of bravery. It wasn't slaying one monster or saving one village. It was 100 small decisions, 1,000 quiet moments, choosing patience when anger would be easier, choosing to listen instead of shout, choosing to try even when you're scared. The book, in its own strange way, seemed to understand that. But as Finn grew wiser, more thoughtful, he began to notice something unsettling. Pages of the Enchiridion were changing. Not always visibly, some were subtly darker at the edges. Others began to include diagrams he didn't recognize, words that didn't translate even with magic, and some pages were gone. It was as if the book was preparing for something, or responding to a threat. And it was. Because Finn wasn't the only one with access to the Enchiridion anymore. Through a series of strange and ominous events, the book would later fall into the hands of others, those whose hearts were not guided by kindness, but by control, hunger, and destruction. The Lich, most notably, would find a way to use the Enchiridion, not as a mirror, but as a weapon, a key to unlock the gates between worlds, to tear through the threads of the multiverse. But that part of the story comes later. Right now, what matters is this. When the book was still whole and the boy still becoming, there was a purity to the journey, a sacredness. Because in that moment, the Enchiridion was doing what it was truly meant to do. It wasn't about teaching combat stances or how to rescue a damsel in distress. It was showing Finn how to understand the weight of choice. That even small acts, saving an ant, refusing to strike a weakened foe, offering a hand instead of a sword, those moments echo. They ripple across lives, across timelines, across worlds. You could almost say the Enchiridion was teaching Finn to write his own story, to become the kind of hero who questions the script, who knows when to follow, when to forge a new path. And maybe that's the book's greatest secret, that its pages, as ancient and revered as they are, aren't meant to be followed word for word like commandments. They're meant to be conversed with, lived with, challenged. Because what is a hero if not someone who dares to ask, is there a better way? That was Finn. He stumbled. He messed up. He doubted himself more than once. But through it all, he kept choosing. Choosing to help. Choosing to care. Choosing to protect, even when it hurt. And somewhere in that floating spire, in that timeless place where the Enchiridion first opened its pages to him, the echoes of those choices still linger, quiet, golden, like stardust in a library of forgotten dreams. So as Finn grew, the Enchiridion changed. And as the world grew darker, the book began to glow softer, not fading, but retreating, like a candle waiting for the right moment to light the way again. It's poetic, isn't it? That a battered old book, full of strange symbols and invisible ink, could guide a boy through not just battles and quests, but into a deeper understanding of himself. And maybe, just maybe, that's what all great myths are really about. Not dragons or dungeons, not even saving the world, but the quiet, luminous transformation of a person who dares to live with an open heart. So the book found the boy, or the boy found the book. Maybe in the truest, most mythic way they found each other. And from that moment on, everything began to change. Now that we've met the book, let's walk the path it laid out. Not the straight path of a storybook quest, where the hero wins the sword, slays the beast, and goes home proud. No, this path was full of illusions, choices, and small, quiet traps. Some were magical, some were moral. All of them, in their own strange way, were trying to ask Finn the same question. Who are you, really? And the Enchiridion didn't ask it out loud. It asked through symbols, through situations, through the kinds of puzzles that don't just test your brain, but your soul. It began with a riddle. Not a clever rhyme or a locked door, but a living choice. Finn and Jake, still full of that cheerful adventurer's energy, came to a clearing where an old man dangled from a bent tree branch. His cries for help echoed down the mountain. Beneath him, a colony of ants marched in tidy rows, completely unaware of the drama above them. Jake, thinking tactically, suggested a simple solution. Just pull down the branch, drop the man, and move on. But Finn hesitated. Dropping the man would crush the ants. Saving one life would end dozens of tiny ones. And here's the thing, no one was watching. No crowd, no judges, no rewards. It was just Finn the tree and the quiet weight of the decision. And Finn chose the third way. The hard way. He worked around the branch, figured out how to ease the man down without harming the ants. No fanfare. Just compassion in action. A gentle heroism. It was the first true test. Not of strength, not of smarts, but of value. And the Enchiridion, it noticed. From that point on, the path became stranger. Not in a scary way, more like walking through a dream that keeps shifting under your feet. The next challenge wasn't a monster, but a giant ogre who didn't attack. He simply blocked the road, humming to himself and asking riddles in a gravelly, gentle voice. What is the bravest thing a hero can do, he asked. Finn, still growing into his own idea of heroism, said, Fight the biggest monster. The ogre smiled. Wrong, Jake shouted. Eat the biggest sandwich. The ogre chuckled. Eventually, Finn shrugged. I don't know. Maybe let someone else win. The ogre blinked. Closer, he said, stepping aside. He never gave a real answer. Because the answer wasn't the point. These weren't riddles with clean solutions. They were mirrors. Ways to press on Finn's thoughts and see what rose to the surface. Not to reward correctness, but to reveal depth. And then came the mirror. Not a symbolic one, a real mirror. Tall, foggy, with a frame carved in twisting golden patterns, that shimmered slightly when you stepped near. It sat in a hollow chamber with no roof, just starlight pouring in. And when Finn looked inside, he didn't see himself. He saw a version of himself, a little taller, more confident, holding a blade of pure light. Behind him, people cheering, crowns on his head, victories. At first it thrilled him, but then the mirror self turned and smiled. A hollow, proud smile, eyes cold. A hero who had won everything, but looked utterly, painfully alone. Finn looked away. The mirror shimmered, cracked slightly, and whispered something so faint only he could hear. Be careful what kind of hero you dream of becoming. That stayed with him. Because the trials weren't just about doing good. They were about understanding why you do good. To protect, to feel strong, to be loved, or to serve something quieter, gentler. Each challenge shaped him a little more, not through violence, but through reflection. There was a field of flowers that sang when you stepped on them soft, whispery notes. The faster you ran, the louder they cried. Finn had to slow down. Listen. Move with intention. A simple task, but emotionally exhausting. Because the real enemy wasn't out there. It was rushing, impulsiveness, ego. The Enchiridion was teaching him to be still, to observe, to walk not with pride, but with presence. And the monsters? Oh yes, there were monsters. But they didn't roar and charge, they whispered. They mimicked. One creature wore the face of a friend. Another claimed to be the voice of his destiny. Each one designed not to be defeated, but resisted. The worst of them looked just like Finn. This version of Finn, the one conjured by the Enchiridion's deeper magic, wasn't twisted or evil. He didn't snarl or hiss. He smiled. He said things like, "You don't have to struggle anymore. You could be done now." He offered shortcuts, promises of praise, a life where the hard choices were already made, and he always came out looking like the hero. But Finn, young as he was, could feel the hollowness behind those words. They weren't cruel. They were empty. And somehow, that was more dangerous. Because the trials weren't trying to break Finn. They were trying to tempt him into becoming something less than himself, all while thinking he was becoming more. This was the mirror of self. Not just what you see on the outside, but the layered, flickering versions of yourself that live inside. The performer, the people-pleaser, the shortcut taker, the hero who wants the title more than the truth. And the Enchiridion was a gentle but persistent hand, holding that mirror up and whispering, "Choose who you will be." One trial in particular stood out. It was quiet, just a stone table with 2 glasses of water. One was clear, one was clouded. A note sat beside them. One will give strength, the other weakness. The choice will shape the next step. No hints, no riddles, just a stillness. Jake muttered, "This feels like a trick," and Finn agreed. Because maybe that was the real trick. Not choosing which cup gave strength, but deciding what strength even meant. Finn chose the cloudy one. It tasted bitter. And what followed was not power. It was fatigue. A heavy weight in his arms, his legs slow, breath shallow. For the next challenge, he was tired. But that's when it hit him. The challenge wasn't about being powerful. It was about pushing forward without power. Finding strength, not in the body, but in will, in determination. In asking yourself, can I still be kind when I'm worn down? Can I still choose right when it's not easy? That was the heart of the Enchiridion's path. Not loud glory, but quiet resolve. And with each of these tests, Finn wasn't just learning what a hero does. He was learning what kind of person he wanted to be. He learned that sometimes doing nothing is the bravest act, like when he came upon a creature bound in chains, snarling, threatening, begging to be freed. The creature promised favors, rewards, even truths about the universe. Finn was tempted. But something in his gut whispered, "Not yet. Not this way." And he walked away. The creature screamed. Then it faded an illusion, a test, meant to measure his thirst for knowledge and his willingness to ignore consequence. It would have been so easy to pass these trials if he had been someone else. Someone cleverer, crueler, faster. But Finn passed them by being honest, by being himself. And that was exactly what the book needed to see. Because the Enchiridion wasn't searching for someone perfect. It was searching for someone real. The trials slowly gave way to a kind of calm. The scenery softened. The monsters grew quiet. The mirror no longer showed an alternate self. It simply showed Finn as he was. Not heroic, not flawless. Just standing, tired, still breathing, still choosing. And in that final hallway before he would reach the chamber, where the Enchiridion waited, not just to be taken, but accepted, Finn passed one last inscription etched into the stone. He who conquers others is mighty. He who conquers himself is eternal. Finn read it. He didn't fully understand it, but he felt it. And that was enough. When Finn finally stepped into the inner sanctum, that sacred, quiet chamber, at the heart of the Enchiridion's trials, he expected something epic, a glowing altar, a chorus of whispers, some ancient guardian rising from a plinth to declare his worth. Instead, there was a tree, a small one. Its bark was knotted, its branches thin, and its few leaves shimmered with soft golden light. Beneath it sat a single, low pedestal. And on that pedestal, almost unremarkable in its simplicity, rested the Enchiridion. The book didn't glow. It didn't hum with power. It simply was. Jake broke the silence first. "Man, that's the big secret? I thought we were going to fight a lava dragon or something." But Finn said nothing. Because he felt it, the weight of the room. Not a physical pressure, but a spiritual one. A stillness that hummed with meaning. As he approached, the book almost seemed to breathe. Its leather cover was weathered, marked, touched by dozens, maybe hundreds of hands before his. The Enchiridion, after all, was not just a book. It was a record, a memory, a thread in the long braid of heroism across the ages. Not a guide to becoming a hero, but a reflection of those who had dared to try. Each trial Finn passed had left an imprint on the book, just as each had changed him. And now it was time for choice. Not just to pick up the book, but to claim it. To declare without anyone watching or praising or awarding him, "I am ready to carry the weight of my choices." He reached forward, his fingers brushed the cover, and the room changed. The trees shimmered, not violently, not with fireworks, but like a soft breeze moving through old memory. Suddenly, the walls of the chamber fell away. Finn was no longer underground, no longer in the material world. He was in a space of stars and shadows. A kind of void, but not empty alive. Filled with glimmers, echoes, the faintest impressions of people long gone. He stood not before the book now, but within it. Each star around him flickered, holding stories, moments, echoes of heroism, both noble and flawed. A princess once traded her freedom to save a village. A thief gave up a fortune to protect a friend. A warrior chose mercy over vengeance. Not all of them succeeded, but each of them chose. They made a mark not on the world, but on themselves. And now it was Finn's turn. A voice echoed, not loud, not deep, gentle. curious. "What have you learned?" It wasn't a test. It wasn't judging. It wanted his truth. Finn hesitated, then spoke. That being a hero isn't just about fighting bad guys, or being brave, or even doing what's right. He swallowed. It's about knowing who you are, and not letting go of that, even when everything around you tries to change it. Silence. Then the stars pulsed. The chamber folded back into itself, and the book was once again in his hands. It had changed. Now, etched along the spine were faint, glowing runes, his runes. They weren't letters. They weren't even words. They were choices marked in light, proof that he had walked the path and left it wiser. Jake looked confused. What just happened? Finn smiled, not entirely sure himself. But he felt steady. Not powerful, not chosen, just whole. That night, around a campfire under the stars, Finn flipped open the Enchiridion. The first page read, "This book belongs to those who seek not victory, but understanding." It was blank beneath, waiting. Because the Enchiridion isn't finished. It never is. Every hero who touches it, who carries it, or is carried by it, adds to its pages, not with ink, but with their life. And so as Finn drifted into sleep that night with the book beside him, the stars above seemed to shimmer in new patterns. The journey wasn't over. It had only just begun. Because riddles and monsters will always return. But the mirror, that strange inner mirror, will never stop asking, "Who are you becoming?" Though Finn now possessed the Enchiridion, its deeper riddles were only beginning to reveal themselves. The book, it seemed, was not static. It shifted, responded, not to willpower, but to growth. Days passed, then weeks. And sometimes, late at night, when the fire had gone low and Jake was softly snoring with his belly rising like dough in a warm kitchen, Finn would open the Enchiridion again, not to study it, but to listen. The pages were filled with sketches, metaphors, strange diagrams that didn't always make sense. Some were childish doodles, others ancient, cryptic symbols older than the Candy Kingdom itself. But every so often, a page would appear that hadn't been there the day before. Like the book, knew something had changed inside him. One night, a new riddle emerged, scrawled in oddly familiar handwriting. What is braver, to fight your enemy or forgive them? And beneath it, in the margins, a note. The hardest battles leave no scars. Finn sat for a long while, turning those words over in his head. He remembered the grassy wizard, how he'd wanted to punch that guy into orbit, but he hadn't. He remembered the time he helped Ice King, not because he had to, but because he could. He thought of Fern, of how anger can feel righteous until it makes a stranger of your own reflection. The Enchiridion wasn't teaching him spells or sword skills anymore. It was showing him himself. And perhaps that was the quiet magic of the book, that it never gave him a single clear answer. No how to be good checklist. No glowing arrows pointing forward. Just moments, reflections, sometimes even painful ones. In one section, Finn discovered a passage titled, "The Wound You Hide." It began, "All heroes are broken, not because they failed, but because they cared." Beneath it was a single image, a young warrior with wide, earnest eyes. His shadow behind him was tall and monstrous, not evil, but aching. Finn closed the book softly. He remembered Flame Princess, his mistakes, the things he'd said, the choices he wished he could take back. And he wondered not if he was a hero, but if he wanted to be. Not the sword-swinging, dragon-slaying kind, but the kind that understood what it meant to hurt others, even accidentally. The kind that tried to make amends, not just move on. The Enchiridion had started as a symbol, a shiny trophy of heroism. Now, it was more like a mirror, one that didn't judge, just reflected. Still, riddles remained. Some pages were sealed, fused shut with waxy threads. Others faded as he read them, like dreams slipping through morning light. One page simply read, "Ask the book no questions you aren't ready to answer." It was maddening and comforting. Jake, of course, had his own take. "Dude," he said one afternoon, balancing a pickle jar in his nose, "what if the book is just like alive? Like an old turtle that's been around forever, just vibing with your thoughts?" Finn laughed. "Maybe, but it feels more like the book's been watching heroes a long time, and it's waiting to see if I become something different." Jake raised an eyebrow. "Different how?" Finn hesitated and then answered quietly. "Not just someone who saves the day, but someone who learns why the day needs saving." That night, Finn dreamed. He stood once more beneath the tree from the chamber, but this time it was larger. Its leaves shimmered like stars, and its roots reached deep into the earth, tangled around old bones, forgotten cities, memories lost to time. A figure approached, hooded, no face, just presence. It spoke. "The monster is never just the beast. Sometimes it is the fear you carry of becoming it." Finn woke with a chill, and the next time he opened the Enchiridion, a new phrase had appeared at the top of the page. "The final riddle is always you." There it was again, the truth no one says aloud when you first set out swinging your sword and shouting your dreams into the wind. Being a hero isn't a quest you complete. It's a question you keep asking. And the answers change as you do. Finn would go on to face darker things, things the Enchiridion hadn't prepared him for. He would lose pieces of himself. He would fall. But each time, when he rose again, the book felt different in his hands. Not because it had changed, but because he had. And maybe that's the secret it held all along. Not how to win, but how to grow. Not how to be strong, but how to be brave enough to look at yourself and still try to be better. Even when the monsters are quiet. Even when no one is watching. Even when the mirror shows you something you didn't expect. Especially then. The Enchiridion is many things. A guidebook. A relic. A challenge. And as Finn discovered, a mirror. But beneath its cover lies something more elusive and perhaps more powerful than any magical trial or cosmic test. Something that even heroes overlook in their haste to prove themselves. The pages themselves. You might expect glowing runes, enchanted ink, or maps that change under moonlight. And yes, those things exist. But what makes the Enchiridion truly mysterious isn't its magic. It's its intention. See, the Enchiridion isn't written like a normal book. It doesn't tell a linear story. There's no table of contents. No numbered chapters. Instead, the pages seem to respond to you. For Finn, the first few pages were blank. Then slowly words began to appear, just a few lines at a time. Not instructions exactly. More like suggestions, ideas, parables. Sometimes a riddle, sometimes a drawing, sometimes just a single sentence, written in ancient script, that only made sense when he felt something deeply. One page simply read, "The fire that burns your path can also warm the lost." And for days, he puzzled over it, until he helped a frightened baby firewolf reunite with its pack, not through force, but through kindness. Then the words faded from the page, replaced by something new. The Enchiridion listens. It learns from its reader, not just what they do, but who they are. It's as if the book wants to grow alongside its bearer, like a living record of not just deeds, but growth. And yet there are pages that never change. Pages that have been there for centuries, etched in a language older than the Candy Kingdom, older than the Ice Kingdom, older even, and the Mushroom War's fallout. These pages are different. They hum when you touch them. Not with noise, but with feeling. They carry the weight of something ancient, and within them lie secrets that few in Ooo have ever understood. Let's turn one of those pages together now, shall we? Imagine it. Soft parchment, browned with age, its ink glittering faintly in the firelight. The text spirals inward, forming a shape that looks at first glance like a flower, but if you keep looking, it changes. A spiral, a star, a doorway. This is known to some as the glyph of echoes, and it's not meant to be read like words. It's meant to be felt. Some say it's a kind of magical circuit, a map of memory. Others believe it's a sigil that reflects the reader's future, but only when viewed in a mirror of water during a lunar eclipse. Whatever the case, its presence in the Enchiridion tells us something crucial. The book does more than teach. It remembers. Not just events, but energies, people, moments of great choice or transformation. This brings us to a quiet theory, one whispered by magical scholars and forgotten sages across the land of Ooo. The Enchiridion is not just a book about heroes. It is built from the essence of heroism itself. Each page might carry the emotional imprint of someone long gone, their doubts, their courage, their regrets, a magical residue that cannot be copied, only earned. In one of Princess Bubblegum's private correspondences, a letter never meant for the public, she writes, "When I examined a sliver of the Enchiridion under arcane magnification, the ink refused to stay still. It moved, not randomly, but with purpose, as if the very words resented being watched." She described entire sections of the book written in non-Euclidean calligraphy shapes that shouldn't exist in three-dimensional space, letters that looked like they were bending around the reader's thoughts. The closer you got to understanding them, the more they changed. And still the book never lied. It may obscure, it may test, but it never deceives. Because the Enchiridion was not designed by a trickster. It was written, or perhaps grown by those who understood a very specific kind of truth. That knowledge is not enough. That power is not enough. That even courage is not enough. To be a hero, a real one, you must reflect. You must doubt. You must choose again and again and again, even when the easy path beckons. And so each line of ink within its pages is not just a record of what to do. It's an invitation to ask, why do I choose to act at all? But the true wonder of the Enchiridion isn't just the physical trials it lays out. It's the intent woven into its ink, a deeper purpose that reveals itself only to those with the heart and mind ready to perceive it. Let's drift, ever so gently, into one of its lesser-known chapters, one Finn never openly spoke about, and yet it changed him. Deep in the middle section of the book, past the pages marked with obvious trials and heroic ideals, there's a curious spread, blank at first glance. Just two facing pages, smooth, ancient parchment. But those who hold a book and look at it long enough in silence with focused intent begin to see faint writing rise like fog lifting from a morning field. This chapter is often called the living test. It doesn't present a riddle or a map. It presents you. It reflects your current thoughts, fears, and hopes, translating them into visions that flicker faintly on the page, like a magical mirror, but one that tells stories instead of showing faces. Finn once described it, when he finally shared the memory to Jake, as watching a dream that knew more about me than I did. In that dreamlike experience, Finn was guided into a scenario where he met an older version of himself, not post-apocalyptic farm world Finn, or the battle-hardened future variant who had lost his arm, but a contemplative, quiet Finn who had chosen peace over power. This vision, Finn lived alone in a green field with a journal and a garden. He offered no grand advice, only questions. Questions like, what kind of hero do you want to be when no one is watching? What does saving the world mean when the world doesn't ask for it? These weren't battles to fight or dragons to slay. They were questions to feel. And the Enchiridion recorded Finn's responses in real time. Not in words, but in ink that bloomed across the page in abstract shapes and flowing runes, like living art born from emotion, a visual map of his mental state. This part of the book, scholars believe, was written not by mortal hands, but by multiple consciousnesses, all connected to the cosmic owl. Yes, that strange dream being who flies through subconscious realms and watches over dreams of fate. Some believe the ink in these pages was harvested from his feathers, each stroke representing a potential outcome or the ghost of a life not lived. Now imagine, a book that changes based on your answers, that asks more than it tells, that doesn't reward strength, but sincerity. This is why, even among the wisest beings in Ooo, the Enchiridion is seen as dangerous, not because of its power, but because of the truths it extracts, and truths can be heavy things. Let's take a closer look at some of the symbology hidden in those inked pages. For example, there's a recurring symbol in the margins, 3 nested spirals, always etched in deep blue. At first it seems decorative, but when compared across multiple timelines and universes, it appears at critical junctions, when Finn meets Prismo, when the Lich is unleashed, when the multiverse begins to splinter. Could it be that this triple spiral is a multiversal warning sign? Or, perhaps a beacon, meant to help the book navigate across dimensions, or communicate with parallel versions of itself? Some dreamseers even suggest that the book contains echoes of other Enchiridions, compiled into a kind of spiritual archive, and through dreams, visions, or high-level magic, it might sync up with those echoes, feeding the current reader insights from their alternate selves. Finn wouldn't have known this consciously. But during his later travels, especially after encountering the multiverse versions of himself, it's likely that the Enchiridion had already prepared him, long before he understood why. And then there's the ink itself. Some pages are written in black, others in red, and a few in shimmering gold. But rarely, so rarely, you'll find traces of glowing blue ink. This ink can't be replicated by normal means. It hums faintly. And when touched by moonlight, it reflects images, moving, alive, like film on water. Jake once jokingly called it moon juice writing, but even he admitted it gave him chills. What's fascinating is that this ink appears only near passages discussing sacrifice, self-loss, and cosmic duty, almost as if the Enchiridion is alive enough to highlight what it deems most important, like it's trying to whisper something to the reader, a gentle nudge, a cosmic breadcrumb trail. It's worth noting that one of these glowing passages appeared after Finn's first major heartbreak, when Flame Princess broke things off. The Enchiridion remained silent for weeks, and then one night, a single page shifted. New ink appeared, not written by hand, but as though breathed into existence. It spoke not of love or loss, but of patience, of waiting, of the importance of letting go before growing forward. Strange for a book about heroism. It spends a surprising amount of time talking about healing. And maybe that's what makes the Enchiridion such a paradox. And now let's keep floating further down this quiet current of mystery. So far, we've seen that the Enchiridion is far more than a simple instruction mail. It's a layered living text, shaped by its authors, its readers, and even by time itself. But now we arrive at one of the most curious questions of all. How exactly does the book know who is worthy? Is there a deeper intelligence within it? Is the book, in some strange way, alive? Let's gently turn another metaphorical page, carefully, quietly, and explore what lies between the ink and intention. There are moments in the series where the Enchiridion behaves more like a magical object than a written document. It reacts to Finn's presence. It resists evil. It changes hands only when it chooses to. One particularly notable moment is when the Enchiridion is used as a key to the multiverse, but only after it's been corrupted. That suggests the book has rules of access, permissions, and perhaps a form of awareness. Some fans believe that the Enchiridion is bound to a cosmic intelligence, perhaps one of the ancients who designed the original structure of Oo's heroic mythos. Others say the book is a prison or a beacon, created not just to guide heroes, but to summon them across timelines when the world needs them most. One subtle detail. When Finn opens the Enchiridion in different episodes, we often see different pages, some written in ancient runes, others illustrated with vivid, almost prophetic images. This inconsistency may be artistic license, or it might be a clue. A suggestion that the book reveals different knowledge based on who is reading it and when, like a magical mirror that doesn't reflect your face, but your soul's readiness. This idea aligns with how the book functions as a test of character. It contains puzzles, moral questions, paradoxes. When you look into its pages, what you find might depend on what you bring with you, your fears, your hopes, your destiny. Like the mirror of self we saw earlier, the Enchiridion does not simply instruct. It reflects. Now let's take a closer look at some of those strange illustrations, the ones that flash by quickly in certain episodes, almost like visual whispers. In one depiction, there's a warrior surrounded by fire reaching toward a star. In another, a hand opens, and inside it sits a tiny globe with trees and clouds swirling inside. These feel like dream imagery, symbolic more than literal. But what's fascinating is how they echo other parts of the series. The fire may represent the trials of the Fire Kingdom arc. The globe in hand could allude to Orgolorg and the idea of cosmic scale and power trapped in mortal form. These pages may not be telling one story, but many stories all at once, each meant for a different reader, a different time. And this brings us to an even stranger idea. What if the Enchiridion is connected to the multiverse itself, not just as a key, but as a kind of map, a master index of all heroic possibilities? Every timeline might have its own Finn, its own path, its own trials. But perhaps the book is the one constant, anchoring them, guiding them, adapting to their needs. In the Farm World timeline, we see how the Enchiridion can become a tool of destruction when corrupted by evil intention. But even there, it retains its structure, its presence. It's still recognizable, still powerful, like a sacred text that can be rewritten but never truly erased. We could even imagine the book as a kind of living artifact left behind by a forgotten civilization. Maybe the same one that created the Time Room or the Cosmic Owl realm. A people who understood not just time and space, but the metaphysical architecture of story itself. And from their knowledge, they forged a book, not to instruct, but to awaken. Awaken what, you ask? Possibly the heroic potential that sleeps in everyone, even you, even me. Even someone curled up under a blanket right now, listening softly to the flicker of bedtime tales in the dark. The Enchiridion may simply be a metaphor, a symbol of every myth we cling to, every challenge we overcome, every journey we dare to take. Or maybe, just maybe, it's real and waiting for the next soul who dares to open it. But let's rest a moment. We've delved deep into metaphor and multiverse. Now we'll gently coast back to the surface. So, as we near the final pages of this segment, we must pause for a moment, quietly, at the edge of an idea both beautiful and slightly unsettling. What if the Enchiridion's true power has never been in its spells or its symbols, but in the idea of it? Across the Land of Ooo and beyond, those who encounter the Enchiridion don't just gain knowledge. They face a transformation. Not always visible, not always immediate. But something changes. They step a little closer to who they're meant to be, or who they fear they might become. Let's reflect on that word. Enchiridion. It's an old word of real-world Greek origin, meaning handbook or manual kept in the hand. But over time, in Ooo, it's become something mythic. The book you must be worthy to hold. The thing you earn. But the deeper irony is that the book never truly teaches. It prompts. It challenges. It asks questions with no clear answers. Even the tests it presents. Defeating monsters, solving riddles, resisting temptation, are rarely about right and wrong. They're about who you choose to be in moments of fear, anger, or doubt. Finn, our familiar boy hero, receives the Enchiridion after a long and whimsical trial. But what does it really give him? Not power, not invincibility. What it offers is subtler, perspective. A sense that being a hero isn't about fighting, it's about knowing why you fight at all. In this way, the Enchiridion behaves more like a philosophical compass than a magical tome. It doesn't offer straight answers. It offers a mirror. And the deeper you stare into it, the more you learn, not about the book, but about yourself. Let's take a soft breath and shift our gaze to another subtle but revealing moment. When Princess Bubblegum holds the Enchiridion, her expression isn't reverent. It's analytical, curious, perhaps even skeptical. To her, the book is a relic, a device, maybe even a tool to be harnessed. But what if that's precisely why it resists her? The Enchiridion doesn't yield to intellect alone, nor to ambition. It responds to something more elusive, intention. A kind of moral fingerprint, a resonance. And maybe that's why, in some timelines, the book is burned or twisted or lost, because it reflects not just the hero's path, but the world's state of heart. In a world torn by war or ruled by fear, the book becomes darker, harder to understand. In a world guided by hope, even flickering hope, it becomes clearer. And now, here's a quiet theory to carry with you into sleep. Some say there is not just one Enchiridion, that every major being of power, whether they be hero, wizard, or cosmic entity, encounters their own version of it, a unique manifestation, drawn from their psyche. To Marceline, it might appear as a song. To Simon, perhaps, as a diary he once forgot. To Ice King, maybe it's just a comic book that always eluded his grasp. In this way, the Enchiridion becomes less like an object and more like a universal constant, an echo of the moral universe itself. When you are ready, it appears. When you stray, it vanishes. And sometimes, when the world teeters on the brink of great change, it opens on its own. Let's not get lost in abstraction. Let's close this part of the journey with a gentle truth. Whether real or imagined, enchanted or mundane, the Enchiridion matters because we believe it does. Because deep down, we all hope that there's a map, a guide, a story that might help us become who we were meant to be. Not perfectly, not all at once, but step by step, page by page. So next time you find yourself at a crossroads, facing something scary, confusing, or strange, maybe, just maybe, a page from your own Enchiridion will quietly unfold, not with answers, but with the right question. Now we gently close the cover of this mysterious book, the glow of its final illustrated page fading like a lantern at twilight, the whispers quiet, the symbols dim. But the journey? That continues. Let's keep going. Deeper now, into the layers of reality that ripple beneath our feet. Last time, we explored the secrets nestled in the ink of the Enchiridion's pages. Those mysterious glyphs, magical instructions, and encoded destinies. But tonight we widen the lens. Because the Enchiridion isn't just a book. It's not merely a manual or even a myth. It is a key. Not metaphorically, literally. A multiversal key. Let's turn the page. You see, in the surface-level story of Adventure Time, the Enchiridion is introduced as a heroic manual, a guidebook for good boys on righteous quests. But tucked inside the framework of a children's fantasy is something far more layered. Over time, we come to learn that this book has properties that defy dimension. It doesn't just grant knowledge, it opens doors. And what kind of doors? Not just into hidden caves or dragon lairs, but into entirely different realities. Let's rewind to a pivotal moment. In the episode, the Lich, Finn, and Jake are on a mission to stop the titular villain from using the Enchiridion. They fail. The Lich gains access to the book and uses it to open a portal, not to another place in Ooo, but to alternate universes. Through this act, the Enchiridion shifts from a hero's tome into something cosmic, something far more dangerous. In its binding lies the ability to pierce the membrane between worlds. But how? How does a book, stitched from paper and magic, manage something so vast? Let's look closer. Inside the Enchiridion, especially after it is altered by the Lich or corrupted by dark forces, we find diagrams and symbols that seem to be more than decorative. Some fans believe these are arcane blueprints for multiversal traversal, a kind of quantum spellwork. Now consider the strange cube-shaped object that appears alongside the book. This artifact, which resembles a hyperdimensional control panel, connects directly to the Enchiridion's pages. When powered with cosmic energy, it allows its wielder to select realities like channels on a multiversal television. This isn't fiction within fiction. This is lore as infrastructure. And once again we ask, who made this? Who decided that a book bound for young heroes should also be a backdoor into all possible realities? Let's zoom out for a moment. The Enchiridion seems to operate on intention. If used by a pure-hearted hero, it guides them along a noble path. But when placed in the hands of something darker, like the Lich, it becomes a tool of catastrophic disruption. This aligns with what we discussed earlier about the ink itself possibly being alive, or at least reactive to the user's purpose. But when the multiverse is involved, intention becomes exponentially more powerful. Because every decision, every wish, every twist of desire isn't just about one outcome. It's about infinite variations of outcomes. And so the Enchiridion may not open fixed portals. It may instead open mirrors, pathways not just to different realities, but to your own personal variations of those realities. In other words, it doesn't just lead to somewhere else. It leads to what might have been. Imagine holding such a key. Would you seek out the timeline where you made the right choices, where your friends survived, where your mistakes never happened? Or would the temptation become a trap? Would the need to fix the past unravel everything? In Crossover, we see this possibility explode into action. Finn travels into the Farm World universe, an alternate version of Ooo where the mushroom bomb never fell. Magic is scarce, the world is more grounded but also more volatile. In this place, the stakes are higher because the walls between realities are thin, and the Enchiridion is what tears those walls open. But the book doesn't just allow travel, It changes the laws of the reality it touches. Think about that. Wherever the Enchiridion is present, the rules begin to bend. Characters remember things they shouldn't. Events from one world begin to echo into another. It's as if the book reprograms reality with every page turned. Could it be that the Enchiridion is less of a guidebook and more of a command line? Something built not just to explore, but to rewrite. And that leads us to a chilling thought. What if the Enchiridion didn't just happen to end up in Finn's hands? What if it sought him? Or was sent? Because a tool that powerful wouldn't be left to chance. It might be part of a larger cosmic architecture, one maintained by beings far beyond our comprehension. Who? You probably already know some of them. Prismo, the Cosmic Owl, or even Orgolorg, whose agenda spans galaxies. We'll get into those soon, but for now, let that settle. The book that taught heroes to fight monsters and speak the truth is the same book that tears the veil between realities. It doesn't just show you the way. It changes the way. But what if I told you the Enchiridion wasn't just a book about heroism? It was a lockbox of cosmic intentions, and the key to something far greater than Ooo. You see, the Enchiridion's journey didn't stop with Finn completing his trials. That was just the surface story. Buried within its pages were instructions, codes, even runes, symbols that weren't meant to be read by the eyes of mortals, but interpreted by higher beings, cosmic custodians, who maintain the fragile stitching of the multiverse. Let's gently drift back to that fateful moment in the episode The Lich, when Billy, who we later discover is possessed by the Lich, steals the Enchiridion. It's not to read bedtime stories or unlock secret sword techniques. No, his goal is to open a portal, a rip between dimensions. The book, once paired with the multiverse portal in the heart of Prismo's time room, becomes a literal key, not a metaphorical one, not a symbolic one, a device. This shift in function from sacred guide to physical mechanism marks a turning point. The Enchiridion, crafted supposedly by ancient cosmic forces, was never only meant for heroes like Finn. It was a safeguard, yes, but also a potential failsafe, an access card to deeper realms, including the very realm of the multiverse. Now, sleepy traveler, imagine this for a moment. The book sits silently closed in the palms of a corrupted champion. Its golden clasp flickers, reacting to dark intent. The pages hum, not from being opened, but from proximity to a dimensional gate. These aren't ordinary pages anymore. They're layered with quantum potential, like compacted light folded into scripture. Each word, each paragraph, responds to intention. And when the Lich, through Billy, invokes its power, something almost sacred happens. The book doesn't resist. It fulfills its original programming. It opens the gate. And through that gate, we glimpse Farm World, a universe adjacent to Finn's, not unlike his own, yet fundamentally different. Finn still exists there, but not as a carefree adventurer. In that world, he's hardened, weaponized. A boy shaped not by candy and joy, but by nuclear winter and survival. The Enchiridion, by unlocking the multiverse, gives us our first canonical proof that all these alternate versions of reality are real, not imagined, not dreamt up by fan theories. Real. And it raises unsettling questions. Who wrote this book truly? Did they foresee this happening? Did they want it to? Was it a test, one that Finn and his world failed, simply by allowing the book to be stolen? The book, after all, had always known who was worthy. It had zapped people before. It judged. So why didn't it resist Billy's touch? Unless Its idea of hero wasn't fixed to morality, but to strength of will. Think back to earlier when Finn's trial was to resist trickery, solve riddles, and fight with compassion. The Enchiridion approved because Finn showed resolve and integrity. But what if, in the Lich's hands, the book recognized another kind of resolve, a darker one? Will unbending, intent unshaken, the same unwavering drive, but toward annihilation rather than salvation. If that's true, then the Enchiridion wasn't corrupted. It was functioning exactly as designed. Which brings us to the troubling idea. The Enchiridion was never about guiding heroes. It was about testing realities, determining which timelines were worthy of protection and which might need pruning. That sounds a bit far-fetched, doesn't it? But then we remember, in later episodes, Prismo, a being beyond space and time, admits that timelines are curated, that some universes are destroyed to preserve others. And so the book, in its strange, quiet way, could have always been part of that balance, a cosmic controller in disguise, an object of free will that ultimately reported back to the cosmic system, to Prismo, or even further up the ladder, to entities like the cosmic owl or the incomprehensible being called Golb. The idea is terrifying, but also oddly beautiful, because it means Finn, by holding that book, by choosing kindness in the face of violence, added his weight to the side of the multiverse that believed in hope. His decisions weren't just for Ooo, they were logged, noted, echoed, and like ripples through mirrored worlds. And so, each time the book changed hands, each time a new hero or villain touched its cover, the universe held its breath. Who would it choose? Who would be tested? Who would open the gate? And what would come through? Let's wander now through the fractured echoes left behind after the Enchiridion fulfilled its strange function. When the Lich used the book to tear a hole into Farm World, the consequences were immediate and catastrophic. In that moment, the Enchiridion didn't just open a door. It shattered a boundary that had held firm for untold centuries. Farm World wasn't meant to interact with Finn's timeline. Its reality, marked by post-apocalyptic survival, different histories, and altered personalities, had diverged long ago. Yet here, suddenly, the two worlds were tethered by a single glowing seam in space, a seam the Enchiridion had enabled. And the damage didn't stop there. When Farm World Finn first receives the Ice Crown in that universe, delivered by the Lich's manipulations, it sets off a new, chilling chain of events. This Finn, unlike our own, isn't tempered by compassion or friendship. He is desperate, hardened, protective of his family, and in that desperation, he wears the crown and begins to lose himself as Simon once did. This moment, the corruption of another Finn through another relic, creates a heartbreaking symmetry. It reminds us that in every universe, the line between heroism and ruin is heartbreakingly thin. And it was the Enchiridion that made this collision possible. But now let's pause and look closer at what this implies about the book itself. Because after it served its purpose as a dimensional key, it was not left unscathed. Remember what happens next. The book is taken to the Citadel, and through a terrible sequence of events, Finn's father, Martin, escapes, the Lich is banished, and the Enchiridion is ultimately destroyed. Or is it? We watch the book burn, its golden bindings split, its sacred pages curl in flame. But in Adventure Time, destruction is never simple. Objects with cosmic significance don't simply cease to exist. They transform. And what we don't see is what happens to the essence of the Enchiridion, its memory, its code, its imprint on the fabric of time. Could it be that it still exists in the multiverse? In some form? There are clues. One such clue comes much later in the Distant Land specials, where we learn that BMO once encountered versions of the Enchiridion in his travels. These weren't exact copies, but remnants, flickers of the same idea scattered across different realities, pages floating in space, bindings with no pages, even dreams of the Enchiridion, appearing in the minds of beings who had never heard of it before. What does that mean? Perhaps the Enchiridion was never just one book. Perhaps it was a universal constant, an idea seated across every reality, waiting for the right moment, the right individual, to activate its dormant power. Finn's Enchiridion was just one instance, one print. But the concept of the book, its architecture, its encoded potential, could exist across the whole multiverse, a self-replicating key, a repeating pattern like a golden ratio hidden in the DNA of reality itself. And now let's follow that thread into a stranger idea. What if the Enchiridion isn't just a tool for opening doors, but for choosing ending? In multiversal theory, every decision spawns a new reality. Every time Finn chooses left instead of right, saves instead of fights, sings instead of screams, a new world is born. But how are these worlds sorted? Prioritized? Preserved? What if the Enchiridion was a kind of multiversal ledger, recording decisions, archiving outcomes, tallying the balance between hope and despair across countless timelines? We know that Prismo maintains a time room where alternate timelines are stored like DVDs on a shelf. But the Enchiridion? It might have been the editorial voice behind that archive. A filter. A judge. It's telling that the book has always been linked to fate and choice, that it reacts to purity of heart, that it selects who is allowed to read it. And it's even more telling that the most pivotal point of the multiverse's destabilization, the fusion of Farm World and Finn's world, was catalyzed by the book being misused. That misuse didn't just break a gate. It might have broken the rules of the multiverse itself. And this is where things get even stranger. Later in the series, when Finn meets versions of himself, such as in Crossover or Puhoi, there's always a lingering question. How are these realities connected? Are they fragile threads barely stitched together, or do they exist in harmony, part of a greater multiversal quilt? And if so, who maintains that quilt? Some would say Prismo, others would say the cosmic owl. But a quieter theory suggests that the Enchiridion was the original weaver, that in the beginning, when the multiverse was young and chaos reigned, someone or something created the Enchiridion not just to guide heroes, but to stabilize worlds, to give timelines purpose, to give characters agency, to teach them how to be more than survivors, to be better. And that's the most powerful truth hidden in its golden spine. That whether it's burned or lost, remade or fragmented across realities, the Enchiridion remains within every hero's journey, as a code, as a guide, as a question asked quietly in the dark. Are you ready to shape your world, or will your world shape you? And yet, even after the book's destruction and the cosmic ripples it caused, its echoes remain, not just in relics or rewritten versions, but in the very laws of the multiverse. In some strange way, the Enchiridion became a kind of living idea, a mythic constant that loops itself into different forms, testing heroes again and again in every universe. Like a cosmic checkpoint or a multiversal litmus test, its presence seems to say, is your world ready for what lies beyond? One eerie piece of evidence supporting this idea appears in the Farm World universe. There, an alternate version of Finn stumbles upon a version of the Enchiridion that doesn't quite align with the original, but it still triggers events that open portals, distort time, and invite otherworldly forces into play. This version of the book acts more like a corrupted or fragmented remnant, hinting at the way the multiverse tries to reassemble pieces of itself like a shattered stained glass window struggling to reform its original image. Then there's the Prismo connection. As we know, Prismo resides in the time room, a dimension outside of time and space, a kind of cosmic server hub that helps keep all realities in balance. And guess what? When Finn and Jake begin meddling with time, the Enchiridion is frequently involved. It's as though the book is encoded with permissions, admin rights, to the cosmic mainframe. It's no accident that when the Lich uses it, it brings him closer to Prismo's realm and the heart of the multiverse's mechanics. And speaking of mechanics, let's talk about the Enchiridion Gate. While never explicitly named in the show, some theorists believe that the combination of the Enchiridion and the multiverse crystal acted as a sort of keycard and lock system. You need the moral weight of the hero's journey, the Enchiridion, and the raw cosmic matter, the crystal, to activate the gate. The Lich knew this. He bypassed the spiritual path and sought to use the relics as brute force hacks into dimensions. But perhaps that's why he failed. The Enchiridion wasn't just a door opener, it was a test. One meant to be earned, not stolen. And now, let's zoom out even farther. In one of the show's most underrated visual moments, brief, easy to miss, we see a glimpse of a circular diagram in the Enchiridion, filled with multiversal geometry, overlapping rings, branching symbols, alchemical icons. It's fleeting, but some fans believe it references the Great Pattern or the cosmic weave that connects all timelines. These are the secret stitches that bind together worlds like Ooo, Farm World, the Ice Kingdom of 1,000 years, and even the islands far beyond. If so, then the Enchiridion wasn't just about heroism. It was a manual for navigating the deeper architecture of reality. It's a stunning concept that a young boy's first quest, climbing mountains, slaying monsters, answering riddles, was actually the beginning of a long initiation into multiversal stewardship. The Finn was never just a kid with a sword. He was being groomed by destiny and design to touch the fabric between the worlds. And what's even more powerful, he never completed the book in the traditional sense. He didn't sit down and study it like a textbook. Instead, he lived it. And that, perhaps, is the Enchiridion's final test. The greatest key isn't a relic. It's the heart behind the hand that holds it. When the Enchiridion was destroyed and chaos poured through the rift, the multiverse didn't collapse. It reshaped. It adapted. Because it recognized that the true essence of the book wasn't paper and ink. It was the path. Finn's path. Jake's loyalty. The choices made and the sacrifices carried. In the vastness of the multiverse, we might imagine countless copies of the Enchiridion. Some corrupted, others forgotten, and a few still waiting. In each world, a new hero might one day stumble across its spine, touch its strange golden edge, and unknowingly set out on a journey that will decide the fate of worlds they can't yet comprehend. Maybe that's why it always ends the same way. A choice. Close the book or open the door. And maybe, just maybe, we are part of that story too. Because the Enchiridion was never just for Finn. It was for anyone brave enough to ask the right questions, face the dark without all the answers, and walk forward anyway. So wherever you are right now, tucked under the covers, nestled in the stillness of your room, your mind drifting across stars and symbols, remember, the real key is never locked in a vault. It's in the quiet choices we make, the courage to keep going, the kindness to keep hoping. And somewhere out there, Another version of you might just be picking up that glowing book for the first time. The Enchiridion, for all its secrets, codes, and cosmic links, was written with certainty. A book for heroes, a guide for those who would walk the righteous path, battle evil, and bring light to shadow. But what happens when the hero falters? When the ideals inside the book no longer fit the world outside it? Finn the human. Our bright-eyed adventurer once held the Enchiridion as sacred. It was his first real sign that he was destined for greatness, that he was meant to be a hero in a world teetering on chaos. But as the years passed, the title hero became heavier, more complicated. There's a moment quiet, almost brushed over, where we see this transformation start. It wasn't when Finn lost an arm or faced off with some monster of the week. It was when he began to question why he fought. What did it mean to be good in a world where good and evil blurred at the edges? You see, the Enchiridion speaks in absolutes. It deals in binaries, right or wrong, noble or cowardly, worthy or unworthy. But life in the Land of Ooo, especially after the Great Mushroom War, was anything but black and white. And Finn, slowly but surely, started noticing the cracks. There was the time he spared the Lich, watching as its evil twisted into sweet pea. Or the moment he saw how his own father, a figure he dreamed about, turned out to be less heroic than he'd imagined. And what about the conflict between Flame Princess and Princess Bubblegum? Two rulers, both flawed, both powerful, caught in a spiral of ego, science, and fire. The Enchiridion offered no chapters for these things, no lines of ink that could guide a boy through heartbreak, betrayal, or the truth that sometimes the villain is just a friend who made a wrong choice. It's here that we must pause and examine something rarely spoken of, the pages that came undone. Well, not literally, not at first, but spiritually. For a while, Finn followed the Enchiridion like scripture. He quoted from it. He let it shape his identity. But over time, the book began to feel hollow, like a map to a land that no longer existed, a guide written for a world that had already moved on. And then came the breaking point. You might remember it when the Enchiridion, long revered and held close, was ultimately corrupted and turned into a portal, a weapon, a tool of war across the multiverse. Finn didn't stop that. He didn't even see it coming. Because being a hero doesn't mean you're always right. And sometimes the weight of that failure can shatter you. The symbolism of the book's literal destruction mirrors Finn's inner journey. The Enchiridion burns, twists, is rewritten by others and becomes something unrecognizable, just like the boy who once held it with trembling hands. And still, the path goes on. So, where does a hero go when the manual no longer fits? For Finn, that journey meant shedding layers. Not just the Enchiridion, but the illusions he had clung to, the idea that strength always won, that good guys always saved the day, that everything broken could be fixed with enough punches or pep talks. And let's be honest, that kind of realization doesn't happen overnight. It creeps in quietly, in moments between adventures, in the space between one quest ending and another beginning, when there's no dragon to slay, no villain to chase, just silence. It's in that silence that doubt grows. Finn's internal unraveling was never loud, but it was steady. He questioned not just the world, but himself. Was he truly good? Was he really helping? What if some of the battles he fought were meaningless? One of the clearest expressions of this inner turmoil is the Farm World arc, An Alternate Life, where Finn never became a traditional hero. That version of Finn still carries the Enchiridion, but it serves a different role, not as a moral compass, but as an object of chaos, used to open rifts and fuel war. Seeing that alternate version of himself shook something deep inside. What if his choices, his faith in the Enchiridion, could lead not to peace, but ruin? The boy who once looked to the stars and dreamed of noble deeds was now staring into other worlds, seeing himself as a soldier, a tyrant, or worse, someone irrelevant. That's a special kind of grief, not mourning a loved one, but the death of who you thought you were supposed to be. And then there was the grass sword. At first, it was just another magical weapon, cool, useful, a hero's tool. But it slowly wrapped itself around him, both physically and emotionally. A blade that merged with his body, then his spirit. A sword that refused to be discarded. And ultimately, it birthed Fern a mirror image of Finn, grown from his DNA and trauma. Fern was everything Finn feared about himself, angry, confused. Lost in a world that expected him to be a hero, but gave him no clear way to do so. And the Enchiridion? It had no page for this. No line of wisdom for when your own shadow rises and demands to be seen. The relationship between Finn and Fern is one of the most powerful illustrations of the shattered hero's path. Because sometimes your worst enemy isn't a villain. It's the version of yourself that was never allowed to speak. The Enchiridion taught Finn how to fight dragons, but it never taught him how to hold his pain. It gave him rules, but not compassion. So what did he do? He listened. He stumbled. He apologized. And that in itself became a new kind of heroism. One the Enchiridion never wrote about. There's a quiet bravery in admitting the old path is gone, in standing there amidst the wreckage of all the lessons you thought were gospel and saying, I need something different now. It's not as flashy as slaying a monster, but it's harder and realer. Close your eyes for a moment. Picture Finn sitting alone at the edge of a cliff in Ooo. The sun is setting. The wind carries the smell of candy grass and distant fire. He's older now, wiser. His sword is sheathed. The Enchiridion, if it still exists, lies forgotten in a pack at his feet. And he's not thinking about glory or fate. He's thinking about the faces he's met, the ones he's hurt, the ones he's helped. He's thinking about who he wants to be, not who the book told him to become. That, my friend, is the moment the path begins again. Not with a quest, but with a question. Who am I now? There's a quiet beauty in falling apart. Not the dramatic kind. Not the weeping in the rain or screaming into the void. No. The real kind. The kind where the pieces of who you were start slipping through your fingers like sand, and you don't try to catch them. You just watch, and wonder what comes next. That's the place Finn found himself in. No more Enchiridion, no clear map, no sword that solved everything, and perhaps most frightening of all, no goal, no evil to destroy, no prophecy to fulfill, no destiny calling him. Just the open road, and the echo of who he used to be. At first he wandered, physically, yes, across strange lands and hidden corners of Ooo, but more importantly, he wandered inside, through his memories, his regrets, his doubts. Each step forward was heavy with the weight of everything he didn't know anymore. He remembered his younger self, that bright-eyed boy so eager to be the good guy, who saw the world in black and white, who clung to the Enchiridion like it was gospel. He smiled at that boy and mourned him a little. Because part of growing is saying goodbye to the person who needed certainty, who needed someone else to tell him what was right. But that goodbye, it hurt. Some of the deepest wisdom Finn ever gained wasn't written in any book. It came from those long, silent moments after failure, from the battles that ended in confusion instead of triumph, from the friends who walked away, from the times he looked in the mirror and didn't like who he saw. And then slowly, something new began to form. Not a replacement for the Enchiridion, but a different kind of guide. His heart. It was always there, of course, but before it had been filtered through rules, through the pressure of being a hero, through the fear of letting people down. Now, stripped of all that, he could finally hear it. And it didn't speak in grand declarations or ancient wisdom. It whispered, "Be kind. Try again. Listen more than you speak. Let people be complicated. Let yourself be complicated." It was messy, uncertain, sometimes contradictory. But it was real, and in that messy, living wisdom, Finn began to find his way again. Not by seeking out battles, but by showing up for others. By sitting with Fern when no one else could understand him. By accepting that Princess Bubblegum's perfection was a facade. By choosing peace when war was an option. He didn't always get it right, and that too became part of his growth. Mistakes weren't signs of failure anymore. They were proof he was still learning. Eventually, this new philosophy, this unspoken, ever-evolving truth, became stronger than the Enchiridion ever was. Because it was his. Written not in ink, but in experience. Not carved in stone, but whispered between friends. He even began to mentor others, like Sweet Pea, a child once touched by pure evil, now growing into something gentler. Finn didn't teach him swordplay or ancient codes. He taught him how to be present, how to be honest about fear, how to walk your own path even when others don't understand it. That's the funny thing about shattered paths. They don't disappear. They expand. They force you off the trail and into the wilderness, into places the map never showed, into parts of yourself you never knew were waiting. Finn's journey beyond the Enchiridion wasn't the end of his heroism. It was the beginning of something deeper, something the old book never could have prepared him for. A life not lived in pursuit of glory, but in quiet service, in listening, in loving, in being. Picture him again now, if you will, older, no longer a boy, not quite a man. He stands in a quiet field watching a new day rise. The sky is pink and gold. A gentle wind moves through the trees. There's no monster, no quest, just breath and peace. Not the peace of ignorance, but the peace that comes after the storm, the kind you earn. His sword hangs on his back, but he hasn't used it in weeks. The Enchiridion, if he still has it, stays closed. Its wisdom no longer needed. Because now, when Finn faces a challenge, he doesn't ask, "What would the book say?" He asks, "What feels true?" And somehow, that question always leads him home. And yet, there are moments, rare and quiet, when Finn still feels the pull of the old ways. A tattered corner of a forgotten scroll. The wind brushing past him, just right, like it did before a battle. The flicker of torchlight in a cavern that whispers of lost secrets. Sometimes he wonders, what would have happened if he'd followed the Enchiridion's path all the way to the end? If he had resisted the fall, if he had clung tighter to that crumbling idea of heroism, would he have become something greater? Or would he have lost something essential? That question never gets a clear answer. But maybe it doesn't need one. Because what he has now, what he built after the fall, is richer than any prophecy could have imagined. It's not just about him anymore. It's about the friends who helped him grow. Jake with his boundless heart. Marceline, who showed him how to sit with pain. BMO, who reminded him that joy can be found in the smallest of things. Even Ice King, or rather, Simon, who taught him what it means to live with regret and still reach for redemption. Each of them broke the mold. Each of them let go of who they were supposed to be. Each of them showed Finn that identity is not a destination, it's a dance. The Enchiridion, in all its faded grandeur, once spoke of absolute truths. Now Finn knows that truth can be soft and flexible, and born in the quiet space between people who care. That's the legacy he carries now. A new kind of guidebook, invisible, unwritten, but no less powerful. He carries it when he helps a stranger find their way home, when he forgives someone who hurt him, when he chooses to rest, not out of weakness but wisdom. And though he doesn't talk about it often, he still dreams of the Enchiridion now and then. But in his dreams it no longer rests on a sacred pedestal or glows with heavenly light. Instead it sits on a small, dusty shelf, a child's drawing tucked between its pages, a blade of grass pressed in like a bookmark. The cover is cracked, worn, loved, and it waits, not to be worshipped but remembered, as the thing that led him to the edge and taught him how to leap. Because that's the real heart of this story, not the fall, not the fight, not even the wisdom gained, but the leap. The moment he let go of everything he thought he had to be, and dared to see who he already was. Not a chosen one, not a perfect knight, not a flawless hero. Just a boy who loved his world, who made mistakes, who kept going anyway. And in that choice, that gentle, persistent choice, Finn became something more. Not through destiny, not through fate, but through presence, through kindness, through openness, through a quiet courage that never needed a crown. So tonight, as we close this chapter and settle deeper into rest, let that be the echo that lingers. You don't need a sacred book to guide you. You don't need to be chosen. You don't need to follow the path perfectly. Sometimes the greatest wisdom comes not from knowing, but from unknowing. Not from reaching, but from allowing. Not from fighting, but from listening. Just like Finn, who broke the rules, fell from grace, and found in that fall a truth even more powerful than the one he thought he'd lost. Sleep softly now, dear listener. The path is still unfolding, and your heart, your own quiet, steadfast heart, is already the greatest guide you'll ever need. Let it lead you. There's a moment's subtle quiet when you realize the guidebook is gone. Not just lost, not stolen, but no longer needed. The Enchiridion, once the sacred compass of heroes, has served its purpose. It taught what it could. It led where it must. But now, as the world grows stranger and softer and more beautifully uncertain, a new truth rises. The final lesson of the Enchiridion is to write your own, not in glowing ink or arcane script, but in the choices you make when no one is watching, in the way you treat your friends, your fears, your failures, in the way you hold the broken parts of yourself without flinching. Because the old book was never really about the sword or the trials or the monster slain. It was about clarity, a mirror, to reflect the heart of the one who opened it. And now that mirror has shattered, not as a loss, but a transformation. So, what does it mean to begin again? To craft a guidebook with no rules, no rankings, no cosmic gatekeepers? It begins, perhaps, with a whisper of a question. What do you believe matters most? Not what others told you to value, not what you were taught in the fortress of tradition, but what you feel deep in your chest when you're completely still. For Finn, that answer has changed over time. At first it was glory. He wanted to be brave, to be seen, to be sung about in ballads. And then it became loyalty. He fought not for fame, but for his friends. Later still it was understanding, a yearning to know not just enemies and allies, but himself. And now perhaps, it's gentleness. A kind of strength that doesn't need to roar. A courage that's not about charging into battle, but choosing when not to. Your Enchiridion, the one you carry inside, is built from these little revelations. Each day, each breath, another line scribbled in the margins, another page filled, not with perfect wisdom, but with living truth. There's no one-size-fits-all doctrine, no universal path to follow. Instead, there are questions, echoes, moments that ask more of you than you expected, and ask you to love yourself anyway. Imagine for a moment what your own version of the Enchiridion might look like. Would it be clean and orderly, or full of crossed-out notes and scribbles in the corners? Would it have rules or riddles? Would it begin with a grand declaration, "This is how to be good," or a simple reminder like, "Start where you are"? Maybe it's a book made entirely of stories, of small victories, of times you chose kindness when it was inconvenient, of times you didn't, but tried again the next day. Maybe it's not even a book at all. Maybe it's a song, a rhythm you follow without needing to understand the lyrics. Maybe it's a path through a forest that keeps changing shape. Maybe it's silence. Because sometimes the deepest truths don't arrive as thunder or prophecy. They arrive as a breath, a hand held, a tear that falls and isn't wiped away. The Enchiridion was written in a different age, an age of destiny, of monsters, of kingdoms to save. But you, like Finn, live in the age after, the age where the most important journey is inward, where the final lesson isn't found at the peak of a mountain, but in the way you rise from your bed, in the way you speak to yourself when you fail, in the way you forgive someone who forgot to say sorry. So tonight, as you rest, let this be the beginning of something new. You don't need the old book anymore. You are the author now, and every soft, uncertain, beautiful thing you choose to carry forward. That's your next page. There's a moment in Adventure Time when Finn doesn't pick up his sword. Not because he's too weak, not because the enemy has already fled, but because he's changed. The boy who once saw every problem as a battle now sees another way, a quieter, braver way. One where empathy matters more than victory, where listening is more powerful than shouting, where letting go can be a form of strength. And in that small choice, we see something extraordinary. We see a page written in real time, a passage of a new Enchiridion forming not from ink, but from heart. Because you see, the truest hero's guide is never static. It evolves, it bends and breathes with you, even in your worst moments, even in the choices you regret. In fact, those very cracks, those stumbles and bruises, might just be the most sacred parts. They show you where the light got in, where growth was possible, where you didn't give up. That's a lesson no ancient tome could ever fully teach. You have to live it. And in Ooo, we watch that lesson unfold again and again. With Marceline, letting go of centuries of pain and choosing to love. With Simon accepting the weight of memory and identity and daring to heal. With BMO, who never needed a manual at all, just curiosity and kindness and a sense of play. Every character is writing their own Enchiridion in secret. Even the villains. Even you. Now imagine you're holding that book again, your book in your hands. It's weathered, slightly glowing at the edges. There's no lock on the cover, no password required. You open to the first page, and it doesn't start with a proclamation. It starts with a question. What do you love, and what are you willing to protect? That's all. Just that. And from there, the entries begin to unfold like petals, slow and soft. A time you helped someone, even though it scared you. A day you chose rest instead of overwork. A moment when you forgave yourself for not being perfect. These aren't grand, heroic deeds in the traditional sense. They won't earn medals or fanfare. But they are the marrow of the real hero's journey. Because they are honest. They are yours. The old Enchiridion asked its wielders to fight. But the new one, the one you're crafting, asks something even harder. To stay open, to stay curious, to stay soft, even when the world tells you to harden. In that way, every bedtime becomes a kind of ritual, a soft closing of a chapter, a moment to reflect on the lines you've written today, even if they're messy or unfinished or full of doubt. And when you wake up, you get to start again. A new page, a new chance, a new word to shape your story. The final lesson, then, isn't final at all. It's ongoing, unfolding, more melody than a map. Something you feel more than follow. And maybe that's why the Enchiridion was allowed to fall, to break, to be misused, lost, rewritten. Because its time had passed. Its rigidity was never meant to last forever. Heroes now must be more than brave. They must be kind, thoughtful, whole. And those qualities can't be taught in a single book. They come from living with intention, from listening deeply, from daring to believe that your story, yes, yours is worth telling. Not because it's perfect, but because it's true. So now we ask, what would your Enchiridion look like? It might not have gold trim or a magical lock. Maybe it's a wrinkled journal with coffee stains. Maybe it's the quiet voice in your chest that speaks only when the world is still. Maybe it's just a collection of choices. The times you said no when it mattered. The times you said yes when you were afraid. Your code, your compass. The one no one gave you, but you built anyway out of hardship and healing and second chances. Finn's original Enchiridion was handed to him as a symbol. But the deeper truth is, the real guide was already inside him. All the book did was give him an excuse to begin, a framework to grow against, and eventually to outgrow. In a way, the Enchiridion is like training wheels. You lean on it when you're young, unsure, or scared. But if you stay there too long, it becomes a cage. Its rules begin to limit your becoming. What once guided you starts to define you, and slowly you forget you can write new rules. That's why the greatest heroes in Adventure Time are often the ones who let go of the old templates. Marceline, when she stopped running from who she used to be. Jake, when he stopped pretending to be just a sidekick and embraced his weird cosmic wisdom. Even Princess Bubblegum, who slowly shifted from controlling her world with science to trusting the relationships within it. None of them had a manual for that. They had to learn to listen not just to the world, but to themselves. They had to get comfortable with uncertainty. That's the hardest part. The old Enchiridion promised clarity. Do this, don't do that. Fight evil, be good. Stand tall. But the new one, your own, acknowledges how messy real life is. Sometimes there's no clear villain. Sometimes your fear is the dragon. Sometimes doing the brave thing means crying in front of someone when you'd rather stay silent. No glowing sword for that. No spell. Just you. And still, that's enough. The Enchiridion, as we once knew it, bound in leather, laced with magic, marked by heroes, was always symbolic. It was never the point. It was a prop for a much more personal journey. Because every great story is, in the end, a mirror. It reflects your values back to you, your beliefs, your hopes, your contradictions. And slowly, gently, it helps you see what kind of character you are. Maybe you've been a villain in someone else's tale. That's part of the book, too. Maybe you've failed more times than you've succeeded. Another page. The point isn't to erase those parts. It's to accept them, to include them. Because your Enchiridion isn't a list of triumphs, it's a record of growth. And growth is jagged. It's non-linear. Sometimes it means going backwards so you can eventually go forward. Let's return now to a simple idea. There is no one Enchiridion anymore. Not since the multiverse shattered. Not since the old heroes faded into myth. The true guidebook lives now in each person, not as law, but as lore. Not as commandment, but as compass. And perhaps the deepest wisdom is this. You are not just the writer of your Enchiridion. You are also the reader. Each day, you get to read back the story you wrote the day before. And in that reflection, you choose what to carry forward and what to change. You become both the hero and the historian of your own life. And isn't that beautiful? Isn't that what stories are for? To help us remember who we've been and imagine who we might yet become. Tonight, as you lie in the gentle dark, imagine a page turning. Softly. No rush. No deadline. Just the feeling of possibility unfolding. The world may be strange. The rules may be broken. But your pen still works. Your hand is steady. The story continues. And you dreamer, listener, hero, you are still writing. So, what does it look like to finish your Enchiridion? Here's the truth. You don't. That's not a flaw, it's the point. Because every great guidebook is a living thing. It breathes with you. It changes with you. It learns from your mistakes, grows from your regrets, and gleams quietly in the light of your resilience. Even Finn, after all he'd been through, the monsters, the wars, the heartbreaks, didn't reach a moment where he closed the book and declared, "I'm done." Instead, he evolved. He asked better questions. He let go of needing a perfect answer. And that was the final lesson. You don't need to be a flawless hero. You don't need to follow every rule. You just need to be willing to begin again, to wake up tomorrow and write one more page. And if that page is messy, if it's blank, if it's scared, that's okay. It still belongs. Every page belongs. Even the ones you wish you could tear out. Even the ones that are written in the dark. Because here's the secret that no enchanted book ever tells you. You're not trying to become some idealized version of a hero. You're just trying to be more you than you were yesterday. More honest, more awake, more kind. The Enchiridion started as a test of heroism, a list of tasks and trials meant to measure your worth. But maybe real heroism doesn't come from trials. Maybe it comes from what you do after, when no one is watching, when there's no medal. When the story isn't grand but small, a quiet moment, a second chance. A forgiveness you weren't sure you had the strength to offer. These are the moments that rewrite your soul's handwriting, and they matter far more than the battles. So now, as the stars slowly gather behind your eyes, let this be your invitation. Not to fight dragons, not to prove anything, but to notice. To listen to the soft voice beneath all the noise, the one that says, "I'm still here. I'm still learning. I still believe in something." Maybe you don't know what that something is yet. That's okay. The page is still blank. You get to decide what to write. You always have. If you were to open your personal Enchiridion right now, what would be on the first page? Not a rule, not a commandment. Just a reminder. Something simple, something true. It might say, it's okay to be lost sometimes. Kindness is more important than being right. Every ending is the start of something else. Or maybe just keep going. In the Land of Ooo, where candy talks and stars fall in love, where monsters have soft hearts and ancient books whisper spells, the Enchiridion was a guide to being a hero. But in your world, the real one, your Enchiridion, is something gentler, something quieter. It's not made of leather or enchanted parchment. It's made of choices, of love, of moments when you held on and moments when you let go. And it's still being written, even now, even here, in this quiet hour. So rest easy, hero. Not because the journey is over, but because it continues tomorrow and you've earned your rest. Let the final page of today close softly. Let your breath steady like the turning of a gentle tide. And if you dream, let it be of ink and stars and blank pages waiting to meet you. The Enchiridion is in your hands now. Write well, write with heart, and above all, write as you. Good night, dreamer. We'll see you in the next chapter.